Hey guys, it's Lohpally here with another video, and today we're going to be going over patch 11.7 and what that means for our tier list for the champions that you should be playing in solo queue. So without further ado, let's just jump into some of the patch changes that kind of ended up occurring during this time. So as you can see right here, we've got some nerfs on champions like Alistar, Rel, Thresh, etc. and some buffs on champions like Braum with a couple of buffs to ADCs and nerfs to ADCs. Because of all of this, what we're going to be talking about is kind of like the impact of these changes. So I'd say for the Alistar nerfs, these are pretty big tackles on his damage in the early stages, and it will make it so it'll be a little bit harder for you to score kills, but it's not going to do too much in terms of his overall power level. The main thing is some buffs to Braum, which is already starting to see some level of play when you play against other tanks, but not really that much. Mostly maximum knockup durations and E cooldown, which won't have that much impact on it overall. And I think for the most part, this patch is really going to be not changing too much of the landscape of most of the champions and how they play. Even though things like having reduction of stuns, etc., it will probably be big nerfs. Also, another thing to note too is if you already weren't doing the W Max Guardian build, this won't affect things like Thresh at all that you'll see. So let's just talk about our tier list for this patch. It's going to be kind of an SABC tier list, where this tier list, once again, as I remind everyone, is based on if you are usually between silver and platinum. You know, I want to have a tier list that is ease of play. You can pick up these champions pretty well and perform exceptionally well on them. So the S tiers are champions that get a lot done, have really strong power, and don't really require that much skill at all. So the four that we see right here are going to be Leona, Lulu, Bard, and Rel. Three of these four champions have really good roaming and engage tools, and Lulu is just kind of like the anti-tank slash all-in support. So we'll talk about kind of going from left to right. Leona is still really an elite level pick just because of the fact that she does a lot of damage in all-ins, which is super underrated because Leona is also one of the champions that can get multiple stuns off. Since her Q cooldown is so short on that, it means that you can not really rely that much on your AD carry to engage. Plus, on top of that, especially in lower elos, people don't take cleanse that much. So because of that, it enhances the effectiveness of a champion like Leona a lot. She does really well in terms of roaming, and she does a lot with her gold. Whenever she gets kills and she's tanky, she's really, really durable and frontlining. So next, moving into it, is going to be Bard. Bard, even if you pretty much can't use any of the skills, is just a really good champion because of a couple of things. One, he roams really, really well, and this kind of goes hand to hand with his power level, which is that you can portal and always get to fights really, really easily. Most people aren't nearly as aware of you when you move around the map, so it makes it very easy for you to set up ganks and roam quite frequently. If you do hit the stuns, you can gain a lot of value on them, and you can just set up the chimes, your W, in laning phase and sustain through some of the poke in the early stages, which is something a lot of champions that roam struggle with. On top of this, Bard also prints gold for his team. Because of the fact that you run around and you want to pick up chimes, you're not sitting in lane and you're getting EXP, so your AD carry can get soul lane EXP. On top of this, it sets up ganking really, really well. In the same way that Thresh has Lantern gank, you have ways to just Bard portal your teammate over and score kills, making your gank paths a lot more difficult to predict or see out, and you can roam around the map a lot well. He's just like basically the elite level pick of support, even if you don't really play him that well, just because his auto attacks do a ton of damage and his mobility around the map. Next is Rel. Rel basically scales exponentially with power just because of her familiarity with all of her combos. Because of the fact that you can both stun and ultimate while in the air on W, it makes it so that even if you can't hit the W, you can usually combo it quite easily, in the same way that old Rakan could R and then W on someone. It charms them and brings them into the W. Because of this, Rel becomes one of the teamfight menaces that can just pull everyone in and score easy teamfight kills. On top of that, you can play her in lots of different ways, and once you start learning how to use Hex Tech Flash and the demount into remount, where you flip someone over your shoulder like Singe, you can actually score a lot of kills in laning phase too. So she actually has really potent laning phases and is good in team fights. Even though she'll be losing a little bit on her stun on her E, I don't think it will matter that much, because really the combo is the RW in the later stages of the game and being able to frontline very well for her team. Next up is Lulu. One of the problems most enchanters actually struggle with is just the fact that it's so easy to get all in and get killed. in the laning phase against champions like Nautilus, Alistar, Leona, etc. Lulu excels really well at dealing with this because of the fact that she has polymorph, which allows her to CC either follow-up like the AD carry or the melee itself, and the fact that her shield absorbs a lot of extra damage means that she's just really durable in most stages. Also, she's not reliant on things like Airy or healing, so it's hard to get reduction for her shielding. Plus, on top of that, her ultimate not only knocks people, up and slows them, but it also is part of an archetype you can't reduce, which is called bonus HP. So because of that, she actually deals with all-ins really, really well, especially with things like exhaust. And on top of all of this, she actually does a lot of damage herself via auto attacks. So even while she's shielding and protecting her teammates, she can actually return fire and do a lot of damage herself, which is usually one of the problems and drawbacks of playing things like maybe Soraka or Janna. Either you have a big shield and little damage, or you have little damage and a big shield. Lulu supplements both of these very well, with also having a lot of crowd control just to deflect ganks in the early stages. Plus, on top of that, some of the most prevalent AD carries right now go really well with her, like Vayne and Jinx. These champions are exceptionally strong with Lulu, and if you're pairing her with any auto attack speed kind of carry, get through the early lane phase with her tools, you'll usually be able to impact the game very, very well. Moving in is going to be A. Now, the first two that you see are Thresh and Morgana. These champions are actual S tier when either A, Morgana is picked into a counter pick matchup, so when she plays into things like Rel, Alistar, Rakan, Nautilus, etc. But you have to be really good at her. If you're not black shielding consistently, then you run into some issues. So she leans on the A tier, but like Thresh also, they both have S tier potential if you're really good at them. So these are champions that kind of vary back and forth depending on circumstances. If I was making a tier list for like Masters Plus, I would probably put both of these actually in my S tier instead. So if you get really good at these champions, they're really, really handy and flexible because they just have a lot of skill expression. Even with some of the nerfs like the shield nerf, it's not going to matter. These champions are super really good, but you need to be good at them. So that's why they go into the A category, because it's easy to mess up. You don't hit nearly as many hooks or bindings, you mess up your black shield timing, you don't flay a special spell like Zenith Blade from Leona, you can struggle a lot on these champions. So because of that, they go into our A tier. Also, Karma runs into this problem too, where Karma is really strong in lane phase, she can harass a lot, but she needs specific pairings that allow her to push and pressure the lane. Caitlyn comes to mind. Caitlyn's not nearly as frequent as things like Kai'Sa right now. Even after the nerfs, I'm pretty sure you will see a lot of Kai'Sa still. So because of that, she doesn't have as great of pairings. Plus, her W isn't an instant CC like Polymorph is, so she runs into some issues where she can get camped while pushing and pressuring under the turret, which can cause some problems in most circumstances. After that is Alistar. Now, the nerfs are going to hit him a little bit, but really the problem with Alistar is just because of the fact that his damage is a little bit inflexible, because you need to get the auto attack off, so it's kind of hard to always fully lock down people. Plus, he needs level 6 to be super tanky in most cases. Because of these limiting factors, I put him in the A category just because of that. But I do like that he's super flexible with Aftershock slash phase rush, depending on your circumstances, so he can be flexible in that sense. But I think he's lacking a little bit of damage in the early stages, which makes him a little bit on the weaker side. And then next is going to be Nautilus. I like Nautilus recently just as kind of like a pick if maybe some of these champions are banned, just because of the fact that early game seems to matter a lot, and Nautilus is actually one of the only champions that doesn't run into level 1 problems as a tank. Because of the fact that you have Anchor and Snare at level 1, you can actually pressure at level 1 and potentially look for kills. It's very easy to snowball on this champion, and he's pretty easy to play because his hook is easy to land, and his ultimate is a point and click. He doesn't quite make it into S tier just because he has scaling problems, so if you get into super late stages, he's not nearly as tanky as champions like Leona or Alistar or Rel. Moving into the B tier. This is the category where these champions are not bad, but they run into some kind of problem either economically or functionality-wise with just how the game is currently made. So, for example, champion like Rakan, he can use all of the Enchanter or tanky items like Locket, Moonstone, Shurilias, etc., but he doesn't excel with any of them right now that well, and outside of basically playing Zyra Rakan, he runs into a lot of problems where he doesn't do that great in laning phase. Plus, it's super easy to cancel his dashes on almost everything that we've kind of gone up and above. Yumi runs into issues where she runs out of mana quite frequently if you're playing aggressive and harassing people with your Q. And she just needs a host that's doing really well, which means that you as an individual aren't going to have great impact. Senna runs into problems where she needs economy. She needs a lot of money and needs to play aggressively the entire time, which leaves you open to being ganked a lot. And because of the fact that no one really is going to play tank farmer while you play Senna support, this champion can run into a lot of issues that just don't work for her right now. Zyra can be okay in terms of poking and harassing, but the biggest problem is her team fighting damage is kind of lackluster because her seeds and her plants end up dying even though she AoEs. If you like dealing damage though, Zyra is going to be the safest and most consistent poke champion, but if you're looking for more all-any champions, then Nico and Swain are going to be a little bit better for you. All of these champions though run into economic problems, and what I mean by that is they need a lot of gold to actually go up and running, so they need a lot of kills. And so that becomes a lot more difficult as a support just because you basically need to be chain killing people in order to get any advantage. That allows you to leverage the power of these carries. But if you quite frequently fight, and you feel like you get a lot of kills on your role or in your games that you're playing, champions like Brand, Zyra, Nico, and Swain are all pretty good carry champions. Biggest complaint I have about a champion like Swain though is just after the removal of Rod of Ages, it's kind of hard and clunky to find tanky items that also help you be frontlining and do a lot of damage, since things like Ludens and Leandries don't actually have any health in them anymore. Other champions that you can be playing are champions like Soraka, but in most cases you're kind of using the lesser of two evil. Although Soraka has better healing in most cases, the biggest problem is she doesn't have any lane dominance at all, and she doesn't have any CC. A lot of champions right now are equipped with a ton of dashes, and because you don't have a hard CC, it's a little bit more difficult to get value out of items like your silence. So because of that, we just run into problems where Soraka can kind of just get cleaved down or chased down and killed very easily. Kha'Zix is a great example, Hecarim, Udyr. You don't really have ways to stop any of these champions from basically just chasing you down and killing you all the time. Blitzcrank runs into some issues where, if you hit a hook, the champion is super great. We love this champion. But if you're missing hooks or struggling at all, or maybe there's just a lot of tanky champions on the enemy team, you'll run into some issues when it comes to playing this champion exceptionally well. I think also Pyke runs into this kind of issue too, where if there's too many tanky champions, you're really not going to be able to do very much because you need your teammates to kind of set you up for the last hitting of your ultimate. Pyke doesn't really actually do physical damage, he mostly just does execute damage. Next is Seraphine, who's gotten a slew of nerfs just basically over and over again, and nowadays, because of the fact that your ulti is on such a long cooldown, there's a lot of times where you don't have your ulti up multiple times during the rambling of fighting or skirmishing. So because of this champion struggles a lot. Plus on top of that, she doesn't actually lane very well at all because her skill shots are easy to dodge. Usually I like this champion nowadays in terms of a carry position, like if we are playing her mid or AD carry, because the minions don't end up moving nearly as much. So moving on to kind of like our C category is just champions that have either gotten nerfed a bunch of times or their itemization is just kind of bad right now. So as you can kind of see here, Taric, no catalyst anymore, so no great way to actually be tanky and heal at the same time. Set and Pantheon run into a bunch of nerfs over and over again, nerfing their numbers, and these champions were champions that were very feast or famine. If they did really well in the early stages, they'd do super great, but if they didn't, then they'd fall off a cliff. Plus, team fighting is more frequent, so these champions are a little bit harder to navigate in team fights, especially on a low economy, so they're not nearly as good before. Mandate got nerfed a ton of times, plus actually Maokai's E itself got nerfed, so we don't see this champion very much. Same thing with champions like Janna and Nami. Moonstone basically being the only option for them makes them depreciated in value a lot, because a lot of their value is the fact that they had a slow and an easy access to Mandate to give their team a ton of damage. Now that they don't have that access, they're kind of running into a lot of problems. The new tier with the mana problems that Sona has, plus the fact that games are kind of over before she comes online, runs into a lot of issues in that sense. Plus, the removal of Athenes has kind of nerfed a lot of these champions. So Sona, Janna, Lux, and Nami all suffer from basically the removal of Athenes, and Moonstone really doesn't give them the same level of power that they used to get from Athenes themselves with the bonus AP and the on-demand instant powered heal. Gragas is just kind of like a not great support. He's basically only a good response pick to Alistar, but I would argue that in most cases, unless you're exceptionally good at Gragas and being able to isolate people with your ultimate, it's just better not to play this champion as he's just too complicated and complex. Tom Kench has kind of just gotten, nerf after nerf after nerf. And in general, just like Braum, he doesn't have initiative or ways to start fights, so he just runs into a bunch of issues in that sense. And champions like Zilean just don't really have any lane pressure, much like Seraphine, but this champion doesn't really even have that great of a teamfight presence. He's much better in terms of mid lane, where he actually can get a lot of economy and farm, so that his ulti can be a lot stronger. Anyway, guys, that's the tier list for 11.7. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment in the section below, and hit that bell whistle, and I'll see you next time. Peace.